But he's staying on as director at the Victoria Ground and says there will be new financial developments over the next few weeks.
Mr Gibson made the announcement 24 hours after Hartlepool's latest escape from a winding-up order in the High Court in London. He'd said that he would stand down as soon as a bill from the Customs and Excise VAT authorities was settled. But Poole are back in London next month to face winding-up orders from the Inland Revenue and from former manager Viv Busby. Gibson says the money will be found. He says the club will be without a chairman for a fortnight, but added that the reasons for him deciding to quit were fairly obvious.
I no longer enjoy it, and I now believe it's extremely doubtful that with the small base of support that we have, that we could sustain a credible attempt in the First Division.
The new chairman and 2 new directors are expected to take their places in the Poole boardroom next month. After that, Mr Gibson expects the new stand at the Victoria Ground to be built, though he wouldn't say if there would be any cash for team rebuilding.
The chairman of a struggling football club resigned this afternoon. Just another sports story or something that affects the whole town. Tonight we look at a club in crisis. Good evening. Most of the important action involving Hartlepool United Football Club has taken place off the pitch recently. The club's debts have taken it to the High Court to fight winding-up orders. The latest was adjourned yesterday for 4 weeks. A players' strike was threatened. The chairman, Gary Gibson, has been under fire. And this afternoon he resigned. He'll stay on the board until negotiations for a takeover by 2 Tyneside businessmen are completed. But apart from the die-hard fans, does anybody care? Tonight on Close Up North we ask how important is a football club to a town and look at possible new ways ahead for the smaller clubs. First, Steve Sutton reports from Hartlepool.
It's a foul, it's a free kick, and Andy Saville places the ball on the spot, and Crystal Palace are stunned. Nigel Martin to face Hartlepool's top goal scorer, Andy Saville.
January last year, and Hartlepool United reaches the zenith of its 85-year history.
The second division side lead against the team from the Premier League, but it will rankle with Crystal Palace.
Not only does the team knock Premier League side Crystal Palace out of the FA Cup, but they also climb to their highest ever league position, close to the top of Division 2. Now, 1 year later, the club has reached its lowest ever point. Inside 12 months, it's run up a pile of trouble. 2 managers have been sacked. The team's best players have been sold. The club has broken the record for the longest period without scoring a goal. There's been a players' revolt. The club has faced a series of winding-up orders in the High Court. The chairman has decided to resign, and the club is next to the bottom of the table. Failure and Hartlepool have gone hand in hand down the years. The club has had to apply for re-election to the league more times than anyone else. It's got the worst FA Cup record of any league club. And Hartlepool are the only team to have had 3 hat-tricks scored against them in the same match. But then even miracle workers found it tough at the Victoria Ground.
The things that are hard work to other managers are not hard work to me. The discipline side of it and the judging of players, the training, the coaching, these are not problems as far as I'm concerned. Our problem at Hartlepool, my board and myself, gates, cash, etc., etc. They're our problems. We can cope with everything else.
So, when a Durham businessman called Gary Gibson arrived at the club in 1989 and started working miracles of his own, no one could quite believe it. The team avoided relegation, then won promotion for only the 2nd time, and better still, it stayed there. By the time Crystal Palace arrived for FA Cup humiliation, Poole were in dreamland. So what went wrong?
Perhaps we're too ambitious. We all believe we can do better, and that if we bring better players in, we're not that far away from the next division. And wouldn't it be nice to get the First Division in place, Sunderland and Middlesbrough, whoever's there? And we strive for that. And in reflection, we probably overextend ourselves. because the fans, quite rightly, won't come through thick and thin. They'll come when you're winning, and then all of a sudden, if you're out of the cup early as we were this season, and you're in the relegation zone, the crowd have disappeared, and so has your money.
But at the Hartlepool United Supporters Club, there's alarm at the spectacular nature of the decline.
We're back to what we were 10 or 15 years ago in a music hall joke, and at this present moment in time I think we're worse than that. We're a music hall joke completely, and its credibility is nilch, and unless Gary Gibson goes and other people move in, we'll be defunct completely.
We have had good times with Mr. Gibson, but I'm afraid those good times have gone now.
Time for a new man.
He keeps everything to himself. Nobody knows what is going on but him, and you've got to have a damn good memory to do that. He needs more people on the board, with more people having a say in the running of the club. Not just him.
Gary Gibson is the classic hero turned villain in the eyes of the fans. The extrovert chairman, who lives in a rented apartment in Bamborough Castle, found himself under siege as the Hartlepool dream turned into a nightmare. But he insists his record is a good one.
You know, you paint a fairly negative picture, but in terms of financial performance, in terms of making money, and this football club makes a profit, a significant profit, and has done for the last 3 years, and must be in the top 30 of all clubs in the country in terms of financial performance, when you take into consideration the gates and everything else. So balance sheet wise, it's impressive.
We have to take his word for that. Companies House haven't had a set of accounts from the club for 3 years, while shareholders complain there hasn't been an annual general meeting since Gibson became chairman. Little is known of Gibson's other companies, though one of his property development firms, Redcastle Properties, went into receivership in 1992. Hartlepool players past and present are still owed money by the club. After a series of bounced paychecks, the first team insisted on being paid with gate money after home games. Paul Cross was the team's representative on the PFA, the Footballers' Union. He's since been transferred to Darlington.
I'm still owed a substantial amount of money, yes. Well, what I've had to do, I've gone on the creditors of the PFA now. I've put my name forward, and they'll have to just try and get the money back for me.
And you're talking of what sort of money here?
I'm talking 4 figures, really, and it's money that it's a short career. It's football, and it's money that you can put by and save for a rainy day.
The situation lurched from crisis to crisis. Players threatened strike action. The widow of former manager Cyril Knowles was sent a cheque for £5,500 after a benefit match. It bounced.
It's the honour of it all. It isn't so much the money. But I've got nothing personally against Gary Gibson. There's obviously a reason for it, and we'll just have to sit back and wait or whatever.
2 weeks ago, the club was back in the High Court facing another winding-up order. It was saved then thanks to the goodwill of its sponsor Cameron's, the town's brewers, and the local council.
We've added £10,000 to our original loan, which was made last year, of £30,000. That loan was to be repaid by community use of the facilities of the club. That community use has been well used, it's been well repaid. The club have entered into that repayment process with gusto. They've not drawn back at all from the welcome that they've given to the school children and the young football players and young sports people of Hartlepool. That's where the future of our town lies, and those are the people who are benefiting from this particular loan.
We've stood up when other people in the town haven't been there to be counted, but with ourselves and the council and certain other businesses, we put our money where our mouths are. If a subsequent creditor comes out of the woodwork for which we weren't made aware of at this time, then that remains to be seen. But at the end of the day, we've done the best that we can in the circumstances now, because bearing in mind I have a responsibility to our shareholders and our employees to spend the company's cash wisely. I've gone to the wire for Hartlepool United. I can't go any further, but I think what we've done should be sufficient to see them through.
For fans like Kevin McElhone, it's a good job they did. Life without their team just wouldn't be worth living.
We'll always be there, always follow them. We've got to, in my blood. If the way we got put out the league, it would just, I don't know, you try not to think about it because the club means so much to you, but if they did get put out the league, I can't see me doing anything else. I would never go and support Middlesbrough or Sunderland. You know, I'd rather just go watch the Seagulls on the docks and go and watch them. You know what I mean? I just wouldn't support them. They're my life. They're my religion. That's, at the end of the day, that's all it comes down to. Me is Hartlepool United.
For the fans then, following Hartlepool's fortunes is a way of life. But just how important is the football club to the town? Who better to answer that question than one of Hartlepool's best-known sons, Alan Wright. Born on the headland, he presented the Alan Wright programme on Radio Cleveland for 5 years. He runs his own publicity company, and last year he became chief executive of Durham County Cricket Club. His publicity work brought him the job of advising the council on their successful City Challenge bid for £37 million of government money for projects in the town.
Going back to when I was a kid, 3rd Division North days, glory days against Manchester United and so on, and I think purely in publicity terms, the fact that every Saturday tea time the town's name is there and people are seeing the name of Hartlepool. And I keep thinking of the Accrington comparison, that when Accrington and Stanley went out of the league years and years and years ago, even though the town of Accrington, I'm sure, is a lovely place, it's tainted with failure, tainted with disaster. I wouldn't like it to happen to Hartlepool, frankly.
Now, the town itself is going through a period of substantial change. Can you just sum up for us briefly the history of Hartlepool, what it had and where it's going?
I suppose it's about resilience. The town's changed. You know, the headland across my shoulder there was a little fishing village. And then, 100 years and a bit ago, the new town of West Hartlepool sprang up on the back of coal, iron ore, and eventually shipbuilding. Now, whether we like it or not, a lot of that's gone. The Durham coalfield doesn't exist, iron ore in the Cleveland Hills isn't mined anymore, and realistically, shipbuilding is in Korea, it isn't in Britain. What Hartlepool's always been good at is changing, and I suppose 50 years from now, we'll look at the 90s as how Hartlepool changed. The future's in tourism and leisure, Imperial War Museum, the marina, all the good things that's happening in Hartlepool now. And the good thing as well is that realistically, if you bought a new factory to Hartlepool, the way automation is, it would employ a few dozen people. Tourism and leisure is very, very labour intensive, and therefore that's the way for Hartlepool jobs, that's the way the town is going to go. And I think perhaps a generation from now people will see it's just another example of Hartlepool changing and doing it well.
So a period of upheaval for the football club and the town. In the centre, workmen seem to be busy everywhere. Scaffolding clings to many of the buildings, while others await their turn. A far cry from the Hartlepool which, as recently as 30 years ago, echoed to the sounds of the shipyard. Thousands were employed in shipbuilding and associated industries. Now a marina and an armada of small craft take pride of place on the town's watery doorstep. And it's pride in these new projects and the need for more that's brought some of the leading citizens to question the wisdom of using council money to help bail out a struggling club.
I think we'd all love to see the football club survive because when it's doing well, it's a good advertisement for Hartlepool to get the name of Hartlepool across in the press and on the television. But I think many of us have got to ask what is going to be the cost of seeing the club survive. We've supported it through the local borough council to the tune of £10,000, and that's received universal support across all the political parties. But I think now it's time for the club itself and those in direct control to get their own house in order if they want to see the club survive. I think that Hartlepool over the next 10 years is going to be on the map because of quite different and very exciting developments, many of which you can see behind me here. The establishment of the Imperial War Museum's Maritime Centre, for example. And so if Hartlepool United Football Club want to be a part of that exciting new history, they really have to put their own house in order.
And on the streets of Hartlepool, there's no shortage of opinions on the controversial subject of council cash for the football club.
No, I mean we should tidy the town up a bit more.
Decent shops.
Yeah, decent shops.
Yeah.
Just wasting the money. Should be used for something better.
I've supported them for 40 years, so I think it's worth saving, yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, I think every town needs a football club, don't they? I mean, really. And it has been, without one. Yeah, yeah, definitely.
And what about council money being used to help save it? Because some has been.
Well, they use it for everything else, so why not? Just don't know what to waste next in this town.
Yeah, well, it's a local football club round here, so I think it's worth saving. Any football is better than no football, I suppose.
Well, I wouldn't like to see the club go up. I think they need a bit of help just every year. They need financial assistance every year. But they don't do a lot for the community. I remember some of us getting trained off them over the summer.
Definitely think the club's worth keeping. It's an asset to the town, isn't it?
It's the waste money, another thing. But we need it. It's in the papers and on the television every week, and it keeps the town in the public gaze, which is a good thing.
Oh, they'll have to save it. They'll have to save it just for the town. I mean, people come to the town and spend their money when they come to the football match, don't they? Anyhow, my lads think my grandson thinks it's great. I always say the club would beat them, but he says, Nanny, you don't know what you're talking about. We must save the club. Brings people into the town.
And what about council money being used to help save it? They put about £10,000 in. Is that fair?
They wasted on more things than that.
Steve Sutton reporting. Well, just 3 hours ago, Hartlepool chairman Gary Gibson called a press conference to announce he's resigning as club chairman. He'll stay on the board until negotiations with the new owners, who've not been named, are completed. So after all the pressure, why did he finally decide to resign?
I always said during the 4 years I've been chairman that there are two things that people would say, well, you know, when do you think you'd pack in, or what would make you pack in? There were two things. One, if I ever got to the stage where I thought that we couldn't go any higher division-wise, and two, when I stopped enjoying it. I no longer enjoy it. There will be an AGM held, and I shall look forward to being there, because they will prove very interesting and very satisfying reading for the shareholders. The club has made a profit of between £130,000 and £150,000 each of the last 3 seasons, which seems at odds with the current difficulties. But the current difficulties are cash flow. We don't have enough money in the place at the right time.
So what next for Hartlepool United, and what can other clubs learn from their experience? Joining me now in the studio are Sir John Hall, chairman of Newcastle United, Councillor Tony Cunningham from Workington. His town went through the trauma of losing its league football club in the 1970s. And Chris Cox, who's the editor of the Hartlepool Mail. Chris Cox, your newspaper's been campaigning to try to get Gary Gibson to resign. Has he been hounded out of office?
Not by the Hartlepool Mail, but by a whole set of circumstances which I would say are probably his own doing.
So what now for the club?
Well, I hope it can survive. That's certainly been my prime motive. I think it would have been a lot more difficult for the club to survive if Gary Gibson had remained as chairman. I think now there is a real chance of the town and business people in the town rallying to the club's support.
So you'd say it's good news tonight that he has decided to resign?
If you want to put it in those terms. I mean, I'm not happy about the news, but I'm very relieved about the news.
What would have been the alternatives, do you think, if he hadn't have gone?
I think the crowds would have dwindled still further. I think the chances of raising quite a lot of cash to meet the debts at the High Court would have become insurmountable. I think with him going, as I say, there is a real chance of people rallying together and seeing that club survive and go on to some success.
Sir John Hall, how important is it that a football club is successful? What difference does it make to a town or a city like Newcastle?
Well, soccer is the national game, and it carries a lot of hype and media attention. So from that point of view, you know, when a team's doing well, people in the town get their pride back. And, you know, even people who are not active supporters are very proud of the fact that your team's winning up there, as it is with Newcastle at this moment in time. But there's a price to pay. It's a very, very high price. And I can understand Gary Gibson's situation at this moment in time. Not so long ago he was winning. He was nearly at the top. But Hartlepool's problems are those of many clubs in a similar situation in British soccer today. And I feel it's very important that Hartlepool Football Club survives, but that's going to take the participation and help of a lot of people, and they've got to find their own level.
When Newcastle United started winning again, started doing really well, was there a real noticeable difference in the attitude in the city?
Oh, tremendous. You know, you have people everywhere smiling again. And just even a small instance, we played 3 of our matches, one of them against Man United, and it went to 27 countries worldwide, live, and another 27 countries highlights. That's possibly a potential audience of 50 million. The city of Newcastle, of the northeast of England, could not pay for the publicity which Newcastle football team has given them of this last year.
But apart from the feel-good factor, do you think Newcastle's derived any real benefits from their football club doing so well?
Yeah, basically there's a lot of intangible benefits. You go and talk to the people in the workplace and they'll tell you the factory bench, the machines go faster, and just by the good factor does bring in lots of visitors come to the area, and a successful football team and redeveloping the ground, we're going to get the European Championships. That's an added effect of actually getting a successful football club. They wouldn't have come here had we not been successful.
Tony Cunningham, you've been at the opposite end of this situation. Yes. When Workington Town lost its League Football Club, what was it like?
Well, it was obviously a very major blow to the town of Workington and the surrounding areas. No longer was the name of Workington in the national press and national television, people switching on, millions of people watching on a Saturday afternoon for the results coming through. Workington's name wasn't there. I also noticed in the years after Workington left the league that there was in actual fact a decline in the standard and quality of local football, and I think that was partly due to Workington going out of the league. But I think what the town missed were some of the glory days, the big days in the late 50s and 60s when Workington played host to Manchester United, Blackburn Rovers, Nottingham Forest, Chelsea and so on. It gave a tremendous lift, a tremendous boost to the town. And Sir John was talking about the impact in the workplace. They used to say when the rugby league side in Workington was doing well in the late 50s that the local steelworks, the productivity actually went up 20% on a Monday and Tuesday of the following week when they'd had a good win. So a successful club does breed success and it's good for the town.
Do you think Workington still bears the scars of losing its football club even today? In the film we heard about Accrington Stanley and the poor self-image we hear that town now has because it lost its football club.
Yes, because it's associated with failure. But I have to say that in recent weeks the local authority has been trying to put together a package with the local soccer club in order to build a new stand and changing facilities and so on, to bring it up to the sort of standard that would be required to get the team into at least the Vauxhall Conference and hopefully back into the league. So those sort of developments we would hope to get rid of the stigma, to make progress, to have some success, which of course would be good for Workington.
Chris Cox, it's not a situation that you'll relish for Hartlepool.
Certainly not, particularly at this moment where you've heard on the film that so many exciting things, really positive things are happening down in Hartlepool. And I think for the club to go out of existence now would really be counterproductive and weigh heavily against all the positive things which, as I say, are going on down there.
These mystery Tyneside businessmen that we're hearing about who want to put money into the club, do you know any more about them? Is it really going to happen?
Well, I don't know who they are. Gary Gibson wouldn't tell me. I'd like to know who they are, and I certainly think the fans and the town would like to know who they are. I find it rather surprising that we haven't met them yet and had a chance to ask them about their plans. There are other business people in the town who have said they're ready and willing and have the cash to buy the club. I don't know what the position is, and it would be interesting, I think, for all the parties concerned to get round a table. I mean, now is a really good chance to rebuild this club, and I hope everyone grabs it.
So John, you wouldn't happen to know any more about these two mystery businessmen, would you?
No, I don't, but I'd only say to them that if they're prepared to come into Hartlepool, and they're going to have to put their hands in the pocket, because soccer is a business and it's a multi-million-pound business, and you need a lot of cash to keep it going. For instance, I said Hartlepool's got to find its level, because if they challenge and try to go into the first division, they're going to meet the requirements of the Taylor report immediately. So that means they're going to have to spend, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8 million pounds. So the people there's a lot of answers, you know, there's a lot of things to be done and a lot of answers have to be given, but you need a lot of cash and they'll have to dig deep in their pockets to sustain Hartlepool.
Are there schemes that are employed in other European countries that actually help these smaller clubs? I'm thinking in particular of the Nursery scheme. Perhaps you can tell us a bit more about that.
Well, big clubs like in Spain, like Real Madrid and Barcelona, in a sense own smaller clubs, and because there's not much attraction in playing the reserve games that we have, there's not much competition, and all the time, even Kevin and myself are sitting down, what else can we do? And if Newcastle United was allowed to own another club, we would give it serious consideration. We'd either look at Gateshead or Hartlepool or Darlington and have it as a nursery club and for our reserves, and actually play it in competitive football, because that's what our players need. And it works in Spain, and Real Madrid, but they can't never get promotion.
Oh.
They're always going to stay in the divisions, but at least they get competitive football, and it's good for those areas.
Would it work here, do you think?
I think there's a lot of questions about it, but I think yes, it could do. We would be interested.
You'd be interested in taking on a club like Hartlepool,
yeah.
Use it as a hothouse for
Yeah.
Newcastle United players. That's very interesting. Tony Cunningham, do you think that would have worked for Workington Town, a solution like that?
I think possibly it would have done, and certainly at the moment, if Sir John is suggesting that he has some reserve players who perhaps are not playing as competitively as they would like, Workington would be very interested in,
I'm sure you would.
in employing them. And
can you pay the wages?
Hartlepool's a bit
I think
close.
that is doubtful. But could I say that the situation that Hartlepool are in, a crisis often brings a community together. And I think now is the time for the community of Hartlepool, the council, the business, the club and everyone else to actually sit round a table and resolve the problems, because it is, as I said before, a major blow when a town loses its league status.
Chris Cox, I mean, that idea of a nursery club is a very interesting one. Would it be the solution to Hartlepool's problems, or is it a bit limiting?
Well, it's a bit pie in the sky because we're not allowed to do it at the moment, of course. But I think it's a very interesting idea. I think to capture the passion of football fans in England, I'm not sure that the idea of having no promotion would work, but I'm sure that it's an idea that ought to be explored further.
What's stopping us producing these nursery clubs at the moment?
Well, in the sense that I'm talking about, like the Spanish, the rules don't allow it. The FA rules don't allow it, and they're taking measures. People are afraid that you can fix the games. You know, if Hartlepool played Newcastle in a cup tie or things like that, and they'll fix the game. Or if you were playing against another team and you didn't want them to go up, you could put 4 or 5 first division players, or Premier Division players in. So there are problems to it, but there's a lot of changes need to take place in soccer, and they're starting now. Because I said before, it's a multi-million-pound business which has to be run by the professionals. But I'd say, in a sense, to the people of Hartlepool, all those who are interested in rescuing the team, sit down, get together. It's time to do that. But think very carefully where you want to go. Because the moment you decide to be ambitious, there is a price to pay for that ambition. And it'll cost you money. There's a lot of people sit around and basically say, oh, it's great, full of ideas, but who's going to put their hand on the pocket and put the money on the table?
We know it's a big business. Does that mean we have to accept that some clubs, the Hartlepool Uniteds of this world, are just going to have to fall by the wayside?
Well, they may have to go part-time. They might have to find their own level. Soccer might not disappear, but it might be that they're not full-time professionals. That's going to happen in any case. It's the change that's taking place in British soccer today. You've got to face up to it.
It seems very sad, though, doesn't it, that at the moment the FA Cup, the FA rules are such that we can't actually do much to help these clubs.
Well, it's like anything else. They've got to help themselves. They do get some grants from the FA. They do get money from the pool, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, it's a business, and the shareholders who own the business have to run it. They delegate to the board, figure the powers. But if you're the shareholder and you're the chairman, you've got absolute power. And it's no good, because we had to do it in Newcastle. Newcastle's carried because of the money that my family's put into Newcastle. We're the shareholders. We haven't cried spilt milk. So Hartlepool or any other club, it's up to management to manage, and it's up to the shareholders to put the money forward if they've got it to run the business.
I realise this is a totally hypothetical situation, but why couldn't you, for example, take over the running of Hartlepool United and run it as, not a sort of hot house?
There aren't enough hours in the day running Newcastle. You complain in the sense of Newcastle. No, it's one club at a time, and we've got enough on making Newcastle into the champion team that we want it to be. One of the top 3 in the UK. We've got enough on. It's up to the people. If it was part of the structure, we'd have our management structure helping Hartlepool, but certainly I wouldn't want to get involved at this moment in time until it was, it would help. We helped them with a game, and we lost a player.
Chris Cox, given that we know very little about these mystery businessmen who may or may not be coming forward to help Hartlepool United, are you hopeful about the situation, very briefly?
That the club can survive? Yes, very hopeful. I think there's a huge will now and a huge obstacle removed in the fact that Gary Gibson has resigned. And
that's where we have to leave it. Thank you all very much. We leave our discussion on television here, but we're continuing the debate now on your local radio station. Give us a call on 091 232 6565. Put your points to Sir John Hall, Tony Cunningham and Bobby Moncur. But from close up north, good night.
last night on the future of clubs like Hartlepool. Sir John suggested big clubs like his should be allowed to take over those like Hartlepool and run them as nursery sides. But Michael Knighton, chairman at Carlisle, has described it as an outrageous idea. First, this is what Sir John had to say.
Big clubs like in Spain, like Real Madrid and Barcelona, in a sense, own smaller clubs. And because there's not much attraction in playing the reserve games that we have, there's not much competition. And all the time, even Kevin and myself are sitting down, what else can we do? And if Newcastle United was allowed to own another club, we would give it serious consideration. We'd either look at Gateshead or Hartlepool or Darlington and have it as a nursery club and for our reserves.
If Sir John is genuinely trying to push out feelers and motions which will protect the infrastructure as it stands today, I will support him 100% on that.
But a Carlisle United or a Hartlepool full of Newcastle reserves a non-starter?
Absolutely, outrageously ridiculous.
But then, as on Saturday, the same old result on the pitch. Although new man Harold Hornsey hasn't officially bought out Gary Gibson just yet, he's promising to wipe the Hartlepool slate clean. After Saturday's 4-1 defeat against Reading, though, he knows resurrecting the club won't be easy.
The accountants may still have to give the takeover deal the final go-ahead, but Harold Hornsey took up a position in the director's box on Saturday, which the club hopes will be his for a long time to come. And as if to cement his relationship with the ordinary supporters, the self-made millionaire paid at the turnstiles.
I don't think it's a case of what's in it for me. I get enjoyment out of this. Hartlepool United were going out of business. Someone had to step in, and I like Hartlepool United. I feel we've got a good town, it's improving, and the image that I want for Hartlepool United is hopefully the image I want to give it.
In the Corner Flag pub, home to the 300 or so members of the Hartlepool Supporters Club, new chairman, old chairman, relegation, High Court are all topics of conversation. Not everyone is old enough to join in the pre-match debate, but those who can are looking forward to the dawning of yet another new era.
They couldn't get any worse, so they must get better. Yeah, there must be an upturn now. The new chairman's determined to sort the situation out. I'm sure he's got the cash to do it, and let's just hope that he fulfills those ambitions.
They had a period of as you know, that you've reported several occasions, where there was no money, they were being taken to court. But that hopefully is all behind us now. The players have all been paid, all the debts have been paid. We've got a new chairman, a new outlook, I think, and hopefully the club from now on will start to go from strength to strength.
The Corner Flag is unique in football because the fans built it themselves. All the money came from club members, who also donated their time, materials and construction skills.
We asked the club for permission to take over one corner of the ground and dived in really, and with the help of a lot of friendly people who've helped us in all sorts of ways, we've managed to get the thing up and running.
The Supporters Club eventually wants to plough its profits into helping build the team. After Saturday, the sooner the better. Despite taking a first-half lead through Ian McGuckin, Hartlepool lost to league leaders Reading 4-1. A timely reminder that it takes more than dreams and optimism to build a winning side.